Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Jack Stockwell stream here, the Global Affairs Unfiltered. For my second attempt at trying to sound successful and here somewhat professional in this presentation. I am also simulcasting at K-Talk Radio, which I will be doing a little bit longer. K-Talk Radio inside Salt Lake City. As soon as their news quits playing, then I can combine them into this program. But I've got a lot of really good things to cover today. That following up on a lot of the themes of yesterday and the countdown to the inauguration, especially with the heavy player appointments that President-elect Trump is suggesting for his cabinet, starting with Pete Hegseth. If he can get Hegseth through, and I've already expressed my opinions about that. I'm not too wild about Hegseth, simply because he's a Zionist, and I don't know that he has America's role in the world's policeman clear in his mind as to what he should be doing or shouldn't be doing. But then who am I? I have no military experience, except sitting in my armchair for the last 30 years, making my own diktats out there regarding military procedure and military behavior and military policy. But be that as it may, I've got several things I want to pick up. I was talking yesterday about the Malthusian and the Hobbesian concepts of the oligarchy, the various oligarchies, not the least of which has control of our government and control of our destiny in this country, which is one of the main reasons why there's such a desperate effort on the part to stop Trump's appointees, let alone Trump. Who knows what can yet happen between now and the inauguration. And all these fires in California, and it's going to get worse today because the Santa Ana winds are predicted to get back up as where they were a week ago before the big flamethrower process up through Palisades and the other sides of the mountains take place. New fires are being ignited. The new fire started this morning. There's no thunderstorms. There's no lightning strikes. It's just another spontaneous fire shows up. It begins to be very obvious, I think, what is going on here. And so I want to get into that as well. And then I need to hear this just a little bit as to what is going on at K-Talk. This is a little bit of an inconvenience, and I just ask you to bear with me because this won't go on too long. But K-Talk's been very good to me for 30 years now, broadcasting with K-Talk station. And I owe them my allegiance and my loyalty. But I think eventually it's going to be the stream, and then if K-Talk wants, they can simulcast the stream on their programming if they want to keep me there. At least what I have to say, which I'm very flattered. You know, I have a tendency to ramble, I have a tendency to get out in the weeds, but every now and then I think I hit a very prescient point. And in so doing, I think I got something to add. So I'm going to stop that right now. I'm going to turn on the K-Talk broadcast and welcome those of you who are listening on K-Talk. I am simulcasting on YouTube and on X. If you are having any trouble listening to the K-Talk transmission through the tower or online, you can go on the internet as well. For Facebook, YouTube, you would go to youtube.com/ as it's showing here in the picture, at Global Affairs Unfiltered. At Global Affairs Unfiltered, all one word. If you want to listen on X, it would be x.com/ at, you got to remember the at symbol, Global Affairs UF. So, and I invite you to please like and subscribe this transmission, especially on YouTube. As that audience builds, then we get support from YouTube to promote the show, which is the whole purpose here of what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to achieve. The today's the 14th. I think it's really kind of interesting. The LaRouche organization, which I have had profound respect for ever since my first interview with Lyndon LaRouche. My goodness, it must have been 96, 97. And Jeff Steinberg was a regular guest. Harley was a regular guest. Anton Chaikin were regular guests. All these great figures involved with the LaRouche organization. And then Lyndon LaRouche himself, who was my guest the morning of 9/11. And as the show began there, at 7 a.m., 9 Eastern time, just minutes before the attack began, he and I, we were talking about, or setting the stage to talk about, this oligarchical principle, the principle that goes back to Hobbes, Malthus, the Malthusian concepts, where power exists as it is expressed in the hands of those who think they know best how to use power, which of course is the oligarchy, and that power, governments exist to underscore and preserve the right of the power structure, back then of course the noble royalty, to exist and to exercise their monarchical power over the people. And anytime the people start having an idea of leaving the farm and going on to live their own free lives, it's up to the oligarchical power to step in and cull the herd. And one of the easiest ways they could do that back then, of course, was through war. And even, we've always thought or been of the belief to some degree that things would play out the way they're supposed to play out, and that whatever the powers that be decreed should happen was the divine right of heaven. So we have the divine right of kings. And whatever the kings decide to do as spokespeople for God and the heavens, then the people just learn to get in line, otherwise they would lose their heads, literally. And the only thing that's really changed in the sense of oligarchical control or this kind of management of the human species by greater powers than exist here in my local library board is through technology. As technology changes, so does the overall encompassing power of the oligarchy increase as well. And so we have technology to the point now. I'm hard to hear. No more gain on your mic, even on YouTube. I have my volume way up on both speakers in YouTube and can just barely hear me. Let me turn that over to my administrator. Nick, you think you've got something you can add to that? Anyway, we're checking into that. Thank you. Yesterday seemed to be okay. My mic is all the way up, unless there's some control here that, X is loud and clear. Thanks, Sammer. Thanks, I appreciate that. I don't know what the problem might be with YouTube, but we're looking into it. This is only my second time here doing this, and my webmaster, my producer in the background, Nick, is back in Florida now, is working on this behind the scenes. But anyway, the battle of our future isn't whether or not Congress approves Trump's appointees. It's not whether or not Trump's appointees do an actual good job. YouTube is fine, thank you. It's what we, the people, the hoi polloi for the most part, are willing to live under. This excessive taxation that continues the power of the oligarchy, or what? So that's why the focus of most of my radio shows have been talking about worldwide global dynamics rather than a bunch of local stuff. And sometimes, now volume just got reduced drastically on streaming. Check your speakers or volume controls. I am sorry. My speakers, I'm not sure how to do that. I could bring you on. You just keep going. Thanks. All right. So that's why my focus, ever since I first started talking at K-Talk 30 years ago, has been focused on worldwide dynamics that have a greater effect upon what's happening upon us and the oligarchy that runs America than local American issues, except for what's happened now with the latest thing that's happened with California, and the fact that another fire just started this morning. Palisades is what, 20% contained or something like that, and that's it. And now with the prediction of higher winds coming in today as the sun comes up, oh boy. I ran across this little article. It's a short little article I wanted to share with you. I think is really good, from Courageous Discourse by John Leake. And the title of the article, I'm going to talk about California for a few minutes before I get back into what I was talking about yesterday. Why was the reservoir supplying Pacific Palisades empty? Was the name of the article. And as you see people being arrested with blowtorches, and the one guy that was famous in the video where he's arrested with a blowtorch, and they wanted to know what he was doing with the blowtorch, he said he was trying to light a joint. And he was lighting fires in trash cans. And is this the price to pay for the open borders for the last 4 years? And not just the last 4 years. We've had open borders for a really long time. But obviously it's accelerated over the last 4 years to a great extent, to where there's literally millions upon millions of people who have come across. Is this a part of, well, of course it is. It's a part of the continuing governmental control and the kinds of incredible legislation, anti-constitutional legislation that's going to start showing up, even with a Republican House and Senate. So there's this article, and I'm gonna, it's short, I'm gonna read it. You're not supposed to do that, I'm gonna do it anyway because I think it's hilarious. But this is by John Leake. He says, there's a funny scene in the film Smokey and the Bandit where Sheriff Buford T. Justice tells his son, Junior, to hand over his service revolver so he can use it to shoot the fleeing bandit's tires. Junior obeys his father, hands over his pistol, but to Buford's chagrin, the hammer falls on an empty chamber. And when Buford asks why his son's pistol isn't loaded, Junior replies, well, when I put bullets in it, Daddy, it gets too heavy. He says, I was reminded of this scene when I saw the news that the Santa Ynez Reservoir, supplying backup water to Pacific Palisades, was empty during the fires. Coincidentally, last April, I attended a garden party in Pacific Palisades. The back patio of that magnificent but now incinerated home commanded a sweeping view of the hills, including the reservoir, and I noticed that the 117 million gallon water storage facility was empty. The rationale, well, he says, does it really take almost a year to repair a water tank's cover, which of course was the excuse? Or following the same weird logic that Junior applied to leaving his revolver unloaded, did whoever is in charge of LA's auxiliary water supply conclude that filling the reservoir would make the structure too wet? As was just reported in the LA Times, Governor Newsom on Friday ordered an independent investigation of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power over the loss of water pressure and the empty Santa Ynez Reservoir, calling it deeply troubling. We need answers to how that happened, Newsom said in a letter to leaders of the Department of Water and Power and the LA County Public Works. Department of Water and Power spokesperson Ellen Chang said, we appreciate the governor's letter and believe that an investigation will help identify any new needed capabilities for water systems to support fighting wildfires. So today I had a long conversation with a man who installs fire sprinkler systems in buildings. Having worked in fire suppression for 40 years, he is a walking encyclopedia about fire, how to prevent it, and how to put it out if one flares up. And he explained, the vast majority of people, including sophisticated people with valuable properties in places with high fire risk, have no understanding of the risk. They believe that big fires that destroy entire neighborhoods are a thing of the past, and they therefore see no compelling reason to invest in fire prevention, neither in the private nor in the public spheres. I can take one look at a property or a neighborhood and spot the risks, and most people don't believe me when I point them out. Sadly, it seems that people only learn through loss. And with the prediction, and that's the end of the article, you can get that at Courageous Discourse, John Leake. And with the prediction of the high-speed winds showing up again today with new fires starting as of last night, the airplanes, the super scoopers that go out there with their bellies open and pick up that seawater and come in and dump it, you can't fly. These planes cannot fly at low altitudes, or the helicopters at low altitudes in these kinds of winds. So what you're looking at here is a continuing complete disaster that is only going to expand further and further, I'm afraid. So I want to pick up to some degree where I left off yesterday when I was talking about this permanent bureaucracy. And I've always said, if you don't understand something, or you're trying to understand something to get a better idea, or, oh, I just remembered something. I need to turn off, back to manual. I'm surprised that just suddenly popped into my memory. Then take a step back. Just get back. If it's still not clear, take another step back. If it's not clear, take another step back. And in the encompassing picture that you begin to see, things begin to play out to where you see trends. And when you see trends, you can pretty well trust a trend. They're not going to change a whole lot. And the trends that I was trying to point out yesterday is the fact that the only thing that's different today from the oligarchs of the Venetian period, 1200 to 1500, and then following that and the destruction of the Spanish Armada, the British Empire, which is still out there today. It's just now called, we're going to use the Americans to run our empire. This so-called special relationship that exists between Great Britain and the United States. And I talked about yesterday, in relation to that special relationship, the latest picture of King Charles sitting on the throne with the scepter and the crown, and the rites and the rituals that were performed to show that this elitist model is still there with all the fanfare and the pomp and the circumstance and the gold-crested chariot with the beautiful horses and parading to the Lord Mayor of the City of London. City of London, not London proper, as I talked about yesterday. The City of London, which is a 1 square mile area in the middle of the city, which includes, interestingly enough, the tower and the things that are involved with the tower, right there next to the Tower Bridge, and then the Bank of England, which is kind of the central hub of the international oligarchical money cartel, shows very clearly that this oligarchy is there, that separates the elites from the rest of us, and the power that they have. And interestingly enough, inside the City of London is where you're going to find MI6. The only thing different between that and the United States is that our MI6, CIA, is out in Langley rather than inside the District of Columbia. But anyway, the House of Lords, the Lords of the House of Lords issued this paper that I briefly mentioned yesterday, that if Trump were to be reelected, and this is why This is why during the election process last fall, prior to the October election, they found over 100 special relationship emissaries from the UK were spreading around the United States doing everything they can to pump up Kamala Harris's campaign and to hurt Trump. Because they said in this paper that if Trump were to be reelected, it would end the special relationship. And that simply means if they can't keep the United States as a powerful force defending the imperial interests of the City of London and the British corporate cartels, then Britain may lose that position, and they just can't afford for something like that to happen. So they've done everything they can to keep Trump from getting in there, and of course that effort continues to this day. The assassination attempts prior to the election, who knows what's happened since then that's not being made public in the news. But one of the things that they sincerely do not want is for Trump to get into the White House. The major reason is that he's unpredictable, because one day he says this and the next day he says this. One day he says we've got to stop all this killing of these innocent people, and then the next day he says to Netanyahu, go ahead and finish the job. And then after that he says people should listen to the Jeffrey Sachs podcast, the interview with Tucker Carlson, where Sachs calls Netanyahu a dirty SOB. It was worse than that. And then Trump puts that on his Truth Social, that everybody who's signed up for that, which are millions of people incidentally, should go listen to this Jeffrey Sachs, which makes Netanyahu look bad, of course. And now Netanyahu has canceled his appearance to the inauguration next week to get back at, I guess, to save facers. I mean, how can he possibly show up at the inauguration after what Trump said? Through Jeffrey Sachs. And a lot of this, if you're not a regular at Judge Napolitano's Judging Freedom podcast, I suggest you might want to pay attention to it from time to time, because hardly do I find a group of people that come together that seem to be so up to date on what is taking place. And so when you look at who has the handle of control in this country and who are some of the people most frightened of Trump getting into office, you have to look at Kash Patel's list of government gangsters to be targeted, which includes a fair number of people who have openly, verbally, or published their hatred of LaRouche's concepts of a productive economy. And they're the same group. And so Kash Patel published in his book that came out a year ago, September a year ago, Government Gangsters, the Deep State, the Truth, and the Battle for Our Democracy. Patel names these people who would be targeted and possibly prosecuted once Trump gets into office. And so he publishes this book. It comes out in the press even before he's suggested, a year before the election, to be the Attorney General. I mean, the director of the FBI. And so I have a list here, sampling, that I was able to get from Schiller Institute of some of the names. I gave you, I think, a half a dozen or so yesterday, and of the people. And this is like you're watching a 3-act play that you don't know a whole lot about it before the play starts. And maybe it's even like some mystery thing. If you ever been to a mystery dinner where you're served dinner and you have food and there's these actors moving around where you're having dinner, a part of a mystery play that's taking place, like whodunit, like the game Clue. And every now and then some little thing happens where you go, oh my goodness. And it takes you off in this direction where something is said to give you the idea that you can follow the line of the dialogue that's taking place. Oh, wow, maybe they did it. And then all of a sudden there's by the time they serve the second course, it's gone off in another direction, and you're just completely entertained by this. That's how I feel when I look at how the oligarchy is being exposed and why they are so desperate to keep Trump out of office, even to the point of trying to kill him. And now, of course, with all of the efforts being made by the combined Biden, Biden, of course, is not doing this. It's the power behind him, some of whose names are in this list, are trying to set fires, and you see the metaphor in California, fires around the rest of the planet, so that Trump is in a position where he can't just in 24 hours stop the Ukraine. He can't just in 24 hours get a deal with Hamas to release the hostages, or there'll be hell to pay. A lot of bravado that comes out of President-elect Trump's mouth, but at the same time, it engenders a feeling of patriotism and nationalism that maybe Trump can actually do these kinds of things. But when you consider who he's up against, the representative, the true embodiment of the Malthusian, Hobbesian concepts, that this world is better run by the oligarchy, who will cull the human herd when necessary through war, depopulation efforts, infertility, the kinds of things that latest technology allows them to do, because they can mess with ovarian cycles. They can mess with testicular formation of dead sperm cells. And we eat this stuff every day. It's in our diet, which is one of the reasons why RFK may be a godsend to get in charge of Health and Human Services. But I don't want to get off track here. I want to give you some of these names because it's just fascinating how these things begin to be exposed. That's the first fascinating thing. The second fascinating thing is if anybody's going to do anything about it. And the average American, I think, is to a point where they're beginning to wake up to this, and they're beginning to see, wow, this has been going on behind our backs all this time. So I have a list here, and I think it is alphabetical, but you're going to get a kick out of this. And these are the people that Kash Patel, in his book in September of 2023 that was released, called Government Gangsters, the Deep State, the Truth, and the Battle for Democracy, as gangsters against America. Now, Kash Patel's a rather rich guy, not as rich as Musk, but another person that the deep state does not want his influence. Even Steve Bannon was saying some bad stuff about poor Mr. Musk. Now, I'm not saying one thing in favor or against. I'm just saying what's out there in my face that I know is in your face. But let me give you a sampling here. Michael Atkinson, the former Inspector General of the intelligence community. Now, again, these are people that Kash Patel nominated to become the next director of the FBI, who has sworn he's going to investigate these people and prosecute them wherever he can, has identified these people as government gangsters. The former Inspector General of the intelligence community, Michael Atkinson. Lloyd Austin, U.S. Secretary of Defense. Brian Auten, an FBI official who supervised the Bureau's investigation into Russia's interference in the 2016 election. James Baker, the former General Counsel of the FBI and former Deputy General Counsel at Twitter. Bill Barr, the Attorney General under Trump. John Bolton, Trump's one-time National Security Advisor, one of the worst appointments of Trump. James Clapper, former Director of National Intelligence during the Obama administration, the one that the powers that be do not want Tulsi Gabbard getting in there into this position, because she'll reveal this stuff, and they know it. Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State under Obama and 2016 Democratic presidential nominee. James Comey, former FBI director whom Trump fired in 2017. Elizabeth Dibble, former deputy chief of mission at the U.S. Embassy in London. Mark Esper, Secretary of Defense under Trump. I mean, look at the position of power these people are in that Kash Patel's calling gangsters. Evelyn Farkas, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia during the Obama administration. Merrick Garland, U.S. Attorney General. Kamala Harris. Gina Haspel, former CIA Director under Trump. You notice that all these people are up here. None of these names I'm mentioning were down here among the hoi polloi, doing their little jobs inside of these various agencies. They're the heads of these agencies. The Kash Patel, who has this dynamic behind him to get him in as director of the FBI, is called gangsters. Fiona Hill, former National Security Council official under Trump, specializing in Russia and Ukraine. Hill was one of the officials who testified at Trump's first impeachment proceeding. You see the kind of opposition Trump was up against in his first administration when you had this kind of human scum in these positions when he got into the presidency, and why they desperately wanted Hillary in there to keep the dynamic going. But the power of this opposition to Trump was so powerful, he never could get a whole lot of things done in his first administration. So that's why he's a little smarter in the second one coming up next Monday, where he's got all the people lined up ahead of time to clean this crap out of the government positions. Eric Holder, Attorney General during Obama administration. Nina Jankowicz, former Executive Director of the Disinformation Governance Board during the Biden administration. Talk about censorship. Andrew McCabe, former Deputy FBI Director during Trump's first term. Mark Milley, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who called Trump a fascist and said he was the most dangerous person to this country. Robert Mueller, former FBI director and special counsel who investigated the links between the Trump campaign and the Russia-linked individual. Bruce Orr, former Associate Deputy Attorney General who was heavily criticized by Trump and his allies over his contact with the former British spy Christopher Steele, who wrote the so-called Steele dossier against Trump, which we now know is a load of crap. Nellie Orr, Bruce Orr's wife, a former CIA employee who later worked as an independent contractor for Fusion GPS, the firm that commissioned the Steele dossier. Lisa Page, former FBI lawyer who criticized Trump in text messages with the FBI official Peter Strzok. John Podesta, senior advisor to Biden, Bill Clinton's former White House chief of staff, former counselor to Obama, and the chairman of Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign. Samantha Power, administrator of the United States Agency for International Development under Biden and former ambassador to the United Nations under Obama. Bill Priestap, former assistant director of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division. Susan Rice, former national security advisor to Obama. Rod Rosenstein, former deputy attorney general who appointed Mueller to oversee the Trump-Russia investigation, which of course you know turned out to be a load of crap. Peter Strzok, former deputy assistant director of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division who criticized Trump in private text with Lisa Page. Jake Sullivan, Biden's national security advisor. A couple more here. Andrew Weissman, former Department of Justice official and former assistant U.S. attorney who served as Mueller's second in command during the Russia probe. Alexander Vindman, former director of European affairs on the National Security Council under Trump. Vindman testified against Trump during his first impeachment proceeding. Christopher Wray, director of the FBI. Sally Yates, former acting attorney general under Trump and former deputy attorney general under Obama. Trump fired Yates weeks into his first term after she refused to enforce his executive order instituting an immigration ban on individuals coming from some Muslim-majority countries. Oh. Now, when you put all those people together, you get this Medusa head with all the slithering snakes on Medusa's head. And these These people are the representatives of other people above them whose names you hardly ever, if ever, hear. The real oligarchs, the multi-billion oligarchs who control law, control agriculture, control food production, control energy production, control the flow of credit, control the military industrial complex. How many names have you heard regarding Vanguard? How many names have you heard regarding BlackRock? You might hear of the CEO, and you hear names like Jamie Dimon, but what about the 20 or 30 below Jamie Dimon? And because they usually stay in the shadows, in the background. But these names I just mentioned, I want you to understand, because I'm still trying to understand the implication of what I'm talking about here. These are people who were identified in a book almost a year and a half ago by the fellow who's nominated to become the head of the FBI as being gangsters and enemies of the United States. And look at all the positions of power that they were in the Justice Department, in the Executive Department, in the State Department, in the military. If you have, you know, wasn't it Lenin who said something that the way to take over a government, the things that you need to do immediately is get control of the press, for one thing. You have to have control of the press, and then you have to have control of the police. And if you have control of the press and control of the police, you can take over a country with the least amount of bloodshed. I think it was Lenin that said, and then I may not have the quote, well, obviously the quote is not exact, but that's the gist of what he was talking about. And that's exactly who I've just got through describing here. And so there are some people that the Senate, the Democratic side of the Senate, and some of the Republicans absolutely don't want to get into these positions of powers that can lift the edge of the carpet and show you all the dust that's been swept under there to hide it from the public eye. So this is, you know, the Chinese, may you live in interesting times. I don't know how this could be any more interesting than what is going on now, and every day that goes by leading up to the inauguration. What else are they going to pull? And I suggested yesterday, I think something that might happen is all-out war against Iran. So to have a war with Iran taking place during the inauguration. And at the same time, I'm not predicting anything. I could be just as wrong as I've ever been on anything else, and I've been wrong sometimes. Probably in all truth a lot of times, but perhaps at the same time, David, if you're listening, you say I'm coming across mono, go to YouTube or go to X, and you'll see the live transmission. I'm sitting here in my desk in my living quarters here in this apartment, and I am broadcasting a live stream over YouTube, and you would go to youtube.com at Global Affairs Unfiltered. You have to do the @ and it's all one word. youtube.com/@ Global Affairs Unfiltered. That's the name of my stream. Or on X at x.com/@ Global Affairs UF. There wasn't enough. They don't allow enough letters to put the whole thing in there. So you don't have to listen. You don't have to listen to it over the radio, or I think Simple Radio is still working pretty good. But you can see it live. You can see my beautiful, handsome face, the hair that is disappearing rapidly here on the crown of my forehead, but my beautiful blue eyes, and in the confines here of my apartment, because I don't think I don't think I'm going to be back doing the show in my office anymore. I'm just going to do it from right here, including tomorrow's health show. So, anyway, and then I need to build the streaming audience, and I can't build the streaming audience without your help. So I need you to go to these two sources I just told you, the YouTube one, youtube.com/@globalaffairs_unfiltered, and like and subscribe. The faster I build that audience, the faster I can improve the quality of this and then be able to get K-Talk to simulcast this through their station rather than the interrupted stuff that's been going on. And at X, if you prefer to listen at X, but I would prefer you used YouTube, x.com/globalaffairsUF for unfiltered. And it's all one word, in both places, one word. If you can do that, you'll help me. And heaven knows how much help I need. So anyway, these groups, these people that I'm talking about, I know you know, of all the names I just mentioned, I know you know at least half of them, if not 3/4. There's a couple of names in there I wasn't familiar with. I had to look into it a little bit further. But this is the deep swamp, the deep state swamp that was there when Trump showed up in 2017 with the inauguration, January of 2017. This is why they had to impeach him on trumped-up charges that later proved to be nothing, especially the Vindman case and supposed involvement with the Ukraine. So these are all things that every now and then, you know, like I'm talking about this mystery dinner theater type thing. Aha! Oh, aha! One after another, to where it becomes so obvious what is going on and the battle that's at hand and what you can expect to take place. So I'm going to talk about the fires in California once again. You know, everybody's pointing fingers at everybody. And supposedly, President-elect Trump is going to go out there today and probably stand next to Newsom and, yeah, it's a mess kind of thing. But Trump was there in 2016 talking about how they're asking for trouble because all the undergrowth was getting thicker and thicker all the time. That's fuel. If it were just the trees and some occasional bushes, that would be fine. You wouldn't see the desolation that's happened since then. And he warned them then. Trump not being a fireman, I don't know what kind of fire control experience he has, but it's obvious, I think, to anybody that goes there and sees this kind of a condition. You know, there was the only time I can ever remember spanking my children was my two oldest sons, Ephraim and Joshua. And they were like 6 and 4 at the time. And in the house I was living in, there was this cement conduit, about this big around. And it was in the yard, or the piece of property adjacent to the house we were living in, and it had nothing but dried grass, just absolute dried grass, something we call fuel. And they were inside the conduit lighting fires. And they would take some of this dried grass and put it inside the conduit. I don't know why they were smart enough to do that instead of just light the field on fire. But they were, I guess they thought of some kind of control, and they would light it and the smoke would come out. And I happened to be home out in the yard and I saw this. And I spanked them. I spanked them good and hard. And I don't know if it was out of fear, anger, worry and concern, or what. It's the only time I can ever remember physical corporal punishment against any of my children. You know, there's a couple of them later on when they were teens I wanted to strangle, but I never touched them physically. And the reason I bring this up is because that's what's known as fuel. And so here, there's going to be greater winds brewing up as soon as the sun is up. As I'm looking out my window here, I can see that the sun is coming up here in Salt Lake. And a new fire started just last night. I'm not sure where it is, doesn't matter. There's going to be more new fires all over the place. Is this a distraction away from, in the sense of being able to suspend the inauguration? I mean, the current president's power runs out next Monday. If there were some suspension, as people were talking about something happening last November to suspend the election, which never happened, we are in some of the most desperate, I mean, we are at the end of the system. It's the end of the idea of the unipolar world. And that's these names that Kash Patel published here represent that Hobbesian, Malthusian concept of a unipolar world where the elites have ultimate power over the human family, and the Malthusian concept that the earth is not able in its natural processes to provide enough food for the human family. So the human family has to be reduced in number. And who's going to do it? You know, but the husbands, the husbandry type thing, like you would husband animals, to call the human herd, as we see in the decimation in the Ukraine, the decimation in Gaza, the coming decimation of Syria, the decimation that's taken place in Libya, the decimation that took place in Afghanistan, to cut the population down, except their target is the entire planet. And the battle that, the danger of things right now going really wrong between now and next Monday, in the period that prior to Trump getting into the White House, because of all these several crisis spots that are still hot. But if you don't eliminate the geopolitical design, that there is a legitimate interest of one nation, America, or a small group of nations, the Atlantist nations, and their divine right to rule the rest of the planet, and that they will use any kind of confrontation at any time possible to bring anything that would challenge that power and authority to an end quickly. So there is a hope out there in the direction of the global South and the BRICS Plus and the new nations that are coming into it. They're coming together under the banner, well, I impose the banner, the Treaty of Westphalia, that kind of a thing, where you sit down with your former enemy and you do what helps the person across the table from where you're sitting, so that you beat your swords into plowshares and you take care of one another's interests, needs, deficiencies, maintaining your own state sovereignty, maintaining your own currency, maintaining your own policies inside your country. This isn't where everybody just lays down everything and just comes together with a big kumbaya embrace around the campfire. I'm not saying that whatsoever. Although I think that's part of the dynamic behind the move for a one world government. And so I don't know exactly what Trump has in mind getting into office, because he is saying distracting things every bit as much as there are distractions going on around him. And he may not be correct in all the points he's making. But I think, especially to people in Europe, what they can expect, and people in the Middle East, what they can expect, is way up in the air. And this dynamic, that this inconclusive what if kind of approach continues to spread, it could lead to the disintegration of the oligarchy. which is something that gives me some hope. So one of an immediate thing, obviously, is not just what Kash Patel has identified as the government gangsters and what he plans to do, but the rest of the nominations, in particular the nominations of Tulsi Gabbard, because when you look at Hegseth coming in as Secretary of Defense, there's mixed feelings back and forth. There are some Democrats, most of the Democrats are going to try and stop it, as their fearless leader, Charlie Schumer, has indicated. Chuck Schumer, excuse me. And there are some Republicans who may have a problem with Hegseth. But when you throw something like Hegseth out in front of an investigative committee, armed services, of course, that Hegseth will be sitting in front of in the Senate, you're going to find out really quick who's for America and who isn't. Not that Hegseth is the best choice. I'm not saying that at all. But you're going to find out who's on what side when these things come forward. But the big one is Tulsi Gabbard. And the fact that she, I think to a greater degree than the press has let on, knows where the bodies are buried. And she knows, and certainly has the tools and the wherewithal, although a lot of the senators are saying she's not qualified for this position. I think she is. But you have to understand what they mean by qualified. It's like when you hear political leaders talking about peace, you always have to understand what their definition of the word is, and the definition of the word qualified. To me, the word peace means what? The absence of aggression. The establishment of let's do what's best for all of us kind of a thing. Let's build our infrastructure. Let's build our water dams. Let's go back to NAWAPA that I've talked about in the past, 10 years, 15 years ago, the North American Water Program, to divert vast amounts of melting water in the Canadian Rockies and the American Rockies into huge reservoirs to provide ample amounts of water to turn our deserts into a rose, just like they could be doing in the Middle East. And so when you say peace, you think of things like that. When you hear world leaders say peace, they don't mean that. What they mean is control. Control of the people to the point where their destiny results from the board meetings of these corporations. That's their peace. And so qualified, because a lot of the senators do not think that Tulsi Gabbard's qualified. Qualified to them doesn't mean what qualified means to us. Suppose you have a business, like I have a business. Suppose you have a business and you need to hire somebody, and maybe it's a driver, maybe it's somebody in advertising, maybe it's somebody in public relations, maybe it's somebody in labor and management. And what you want to know, if you're going to hire this person at a decent salary, is this person qualified? So let me see show me why I should hire you. Your bona fides, as they say. Show me why I should hire you. Convince me as to why I should hire you. And you sit there, well, yeah, you're qualified here, and maybe you need some help here, but overall, you're qualified. What they mean when they say they don't think Tulsi Gabbard is qualified is they mean she can't be controlled. That's what they mean. And if she can't be controlled, like this whole list of gangsters that Kash Patel has exposed were controlled, and you know they are because they're all moving in the same direction. You don't see them fighting and arguing and causing disruption among themselves or to the status quo. They do what they're told to do in these positions, which essentially the bottom line is to increase the power of American hegemony. What do we have? Somewhere between 800 and 900 military bases around this planet. How do you defend that? How do you defend military bases in Somalia by saying that's protecting Americans from Somalians. There are people who believe that. Anyway, I'm trying to make a point here about when they say this person isn't qualified. Hegseth isn't qualified. Hegseth isn't qualified because Hegseth might fight against the military-industrial complex. Although I don't think he will, not because of some things that he said. And then there's other appointees. You know, Bondi, who Trump wants as Attorney General. Is she qualified to become the Attorney General? It's not, does she have enough legal experience prosecuting the law in behalf of Florida government as the Attorney General of Florida, and does she have the wherewithal to prosecute and maintain the government of the United States from a federal position? Is she qualified? No. The qualification is, when push comes to shove, is she going to listen to the lobbyists? Is Tulsi Gabbard going to listen to the lobbyists, who are the ones who control government anyway, or your legislative branch? Is she going to listen to them? Is she going to act at their behest? And when she came out and said that these pro-Palestinian protesters on college campuses need to be investigated, she didn't say the pro-Israeli demonstrators needed to be investigated. She said the pro-Palestinian demonstrators needed to be investigated and prosecuted for some of the things that they were saying. Well, is she going to be an enemy of free speech? If she is willing to prosecute people for hate speech, then she might be qualified in the sense of the Senate Investigation Committee or the appointment committee, because she'll do what the status quo tells her to do. When one of the founding pillars of American freedom is the freedom of speech, the freedom to say the things they don't want you to say, the freedom to say things that they don't want to hear. Now we're coming up to the first hour break. I have some things to discuss with those who are listening with on the stream, because I'm going to have to turn K-Talk over to the news break. And then after that happens, I'll bring K-Talk back on if I can remember to do it. I should be able to. I've been doing it for years. But in the meantime, I will continue to talk here a little bit about something I want to reserve for those who are listening on the stream. If I haven't already made this clear, if you would go to YouTube, youtube.com/@Global Affairs Unfiltered, you can see the stream, not just the audio, but visual as well. So we're going to go to break, and as soon as we're back, I'll bring K-Talk back in. So I need to put the mic on mute now to see if I can remember in a few minutes to do that. So I told you I wanted to talk to you about this the Liars Bureau. I think this is kind of funny because one of the immediate things is to try and shape, as I was saying, some of the nominations of the Trump administration, in particular, Gabbard and Patel, because they represent, as I've been trying to say here, something outside the bureaucracy. And they have to be passed because they represent, you know what, Ray McGovern, one of the regulars at Napolitano.com, or Napolitano's Judging Freedom podcast, the Mickey Mac, MICIMATT, I think it is, military, industrial, congressional, monetary he brings the whole group. It's not just the military-industrial complex. He brings in Congress. He brings in the financial aspect, or the Treasury, all these things. And it's something that the Schiller Institute is referring to as the Liars Bureau, which is an excellent description of what are the big lies and why the people who are opposing the nominations of Gabbard and Patel absolutely should not be listened to. And this initial list of people that Patel intends on investigating, which was all those names I gave you, who do their best to try to impose on Congress the legislation that maintains the Hobbesian, Malthusian, oligarchical control of this country, and would punish anybody who's fighting against that. So the situation with Trump coming in, you know, looking at both the potentials and the shortcomings, it seems that Trump is considering a very early meeting with Putin, an early meeting with, I think even Scholz's name was mentioned yesterday. But naturally, well, his remarks, Trump's remarks that the sovereignty of Ukraine must be maintained and respected, well, of course. I mean, even Putin said that the sovereignty of the Ukraine would be maintained, just not as a military power anymore. And Peskov, the spokesperson, declared that Putin is open for such a meeting with other international heads of state, including Trump, but no conditions were being laid down ahead of time for what would be discussed in these meetings. So I think that's probably going to go ahead here pretty soon. But the signs of Trump's new team and Trump himself will agree to some compromise negotiation solution on Ukraine. So the incoming National Security Advisor, Michael Waltz, has basically acknowledged that you have to start on the ground with Ukraine, but and I should save this for the next hour, is that the 5 former regions of the Ukraine, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Lugansk, and the Crimea, will not be part of the Ukraine anymore. That Russia is not about to let go of them. And the Russians, because of all the very bad experiences that they've had with the West, the lies, the obfuscations, the refusal of Blinken, our Secretary of State, for over 2 years now, to sit down with the Russian Secretary of State, Foreign Advisor Lavrov, has left, obviously, the Russian Federation, Putin, the Duma, the rest of them, I think very, very skeptical of anything Trump and his team or the West might have to offer regarding the outcome of the Ukraine. And so from a Russian point of view, the demand that this conflict be frozen in the sense of a ceasefire also is completely out of question, out of hand, because what do you do with a ceasefire? Well, you rebuild. And they're not about to let that happen at all. So I am going to bring, pardon me for my delay here, I'm going to bring K-Talk back on here. All right. All right, that should do it. All right, welcome back, K-Talk, to the second hour of this morning's program. Countdown to the inauguration, I've kind of called it. So I've been talking to my peeps, the new listeners I have for the stream, about what's kind of going on behind the scenes with Putin and the foreign minister Lavrov, and who've openly rejected some of the initial proposals coming in from Trump. And they're not about to have some discussion of some frozen conflict with some recognized demilitarized zone or some recognized area along the front where no one will be shooting or droning or anything else. Now, the Russians aren't going to do that at all. Russians have made it very clear what their intentions are, and Russia wants it to be permanent and a sustainable end of the conflict, which takes into account seriously the vital security interests of the United States. And so while I have a certain level of trepidation and worry and concern over what the oligarchs are going to throw at us between now and the inauguration, and how dangerous the life expectancy of the President-elect Donald J. Trump is going to be over the next several days and even into the new administration, I just hope he surrounds himself with adequate protection. I made a comment about this, boy, I don't remember. It was on K-Talk back when I was doing a daily show for all week. And I talked about that who would be going in president that I would worry about such a thing. And maybe it was Trump in the election of 2016, when it was obvious this whole group, these gangsters, government gangsters that Patel identified or is suggesting to be gangsters. I think I made the comment then that if I were President Trump, remember right at what he did with his family right after the inauguration? Very naively walking down Pennsylvania Avenue with Melania and his son, Barron, just a little guy. Now he's, what, 12 feet tall, walking down the middle of the street. And down the avenue, and I remember watching this the live presentation, inauguration, think, is this man crazy? Or is he just naive? Well, I think he went into that position as a businessman, and I've often described him as a street thug, because that's how you are successful in New York real estate, asking for trouble. Well, trouble he got. And now, as he's going in there, I think he might have the vital security interests of the United States more in his heart and mind than he did 8 years ago. But obviously, the Biden administration is using the remaining period. You mean today is what, the 14th, January 14th? So this coming Monday to really create, before the inauguration Monday, a scorched earth, an absolute scorched earth, by making it absolutely impossible, by creating so many obstacles, so that by the time Trump does become president, internationally his hands are going to be tied because of the conflicts that are just looming there on the horizon. And an outbreak of the Turks against the Kurds, a movement of Israel, who I think about has control of a third of Syria now, completely taking over Damascus, or worse, starting a war with Iran. Iran and Russia are to sign this agreement next week that binds them closer together than even the close binding that exists between Iran and China right now. What might happen to prevent that from happening, or taking place? The oligarchy does not want. The oligarchy has wanted the end of Russia even before the Crimean Wars of the middle of the 19th century. Russia, as I've always pointed out in the past, has 11 time zones. From Washington, D.C. to Honolulu, there is 4 across this country and another 2 to Hawaii, 6 time zones from Honolulu to Washington, D.C. Russia's almost twice that, loaded with all kinds of strategic reserves in the sense of strategic minerals. Excuse me. And it's just not fair that Russia has all this potential development for the military, for their own infrastructure, and it's just not fair when you look at what's going on with China right now and their development with high-speed rail. They just had one opened up that's 140 kilometers or something like that, with these 300-mile-an-hour trains. It's just not fair that China can do that and we don't. So we need to stop the Chinese from doing that. You know, it's like the old Peanuts cartoon, I remember, where Linus and Lucy are sitting there together. And Linus has got some little toy he's just having a lot of fun with. And Lucy takes it away from him. You know, you shouldn't have that kind of fun. So he picks up a rubber band, and it's in the place of the toy, and starts having all this fun with a rubber band. And she takes that away from him, chastising him for having that kind of fun. And it's, you know, I see this on an adult level. Anytime somebody comes out with some new innovative technology that could actually raise the horizon of mankind's development and the conquest of this planet, let alone space, that would lead to lower cost of living, it gets stomped on by the oligarchy. They don't want what California, I think, has one last surviving nuclear power plant, and it's on its last legs. Russia, both Russia and China have developed these 4th generation nuclear reactors that consumes most of its own fuel. I don't know how that happens. I don't pretend to understand the process. But instead of having barrel after barrel after barrel of nuclear waste that's got to be buried somewhere in the American West, and we bury other people's nuclear crap in our backyard, these new generation nuclear power plants, thousands of times safer, and are designed to consume most of its own fuel so that there's a little bit left that needs to be isolated. We don't do that here, but Russia and China are doing it, and because Russia and China are doing it, and India has started doing it, in fact, India is purchasing, as well as some sub-Saharan African countries, purchasing this technology from Russia and China. In fact, Russia and China are coming in to do it for them. They want to do business with these people. And what are we doing? Because we are in such a dynamic, powerful military position on this planet, that seems to be the divine right of America's existence anymore. Just being the battering ram that the SWAT team uses to break down a door of some suspected criminal. We're the battering ram. And this is, you know, in the Confessions of an Economic Hitman, John Perkins' book, where he just clearly lays out how the Western monetarist powers take over a country. And they don't take over the country to better the life of the citizens of that country, to bring them food, to bring them health care, to bring them education, to bring them cheap electrical power. As the Schiller Institute regularly points out, there's over 600 million sub-Saharan Africans who still do not have electricity, when the ability to deliver it to them is there. So as these sub-Saharan country presidents are turning more and more to Russia and China, inviting them into their countries, bring us this power, bring us this electricity, help us with our water demands. We're a desert. Show us how to do that. Feed our people. Give us the health care, give us the airports, give us the railroads, give us the universities, and we'll work a deal with you. And as the president of one sub-Saharan African country, I can't remember which one, I want to say Ghana. He said what we get offered to us from the United States is vaccines. What Russia and China are offering is the future of our countries. And so the West is saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't let them into your country. They'll take over and take your country away from you. Like that's not what the West has been doing. So back to the scorched earth idea that the collective Biden is trying to leave in its wake. So that, and by collective Biden, I mean the people who are behind Biden, of course, many of which were in the name of the gangster, in the Patel's book on the government gangsters. Many of those people who are immediate to the decisions that Biden is making. No, I didn't say that right. The ones who tell Biden what to do. And then Biden comes forward and says, yeah. And he said, well, and I've seen some resistance on the part of Biden that I don't think he's really happy about some of the things that he's been told to do or pushed into doing. For either he doesn't like somebody telling him what to do or he thinks it's really counterproductive. But then they come out and they say, listen, buddy, do you want the truth of Ukraine made public? Do you want the truth of your deals with China made public? You got a few days left. We want war with Iran. We want a massive Atacam missiles fired from the Ukraine at Moscow, enough of them that some of them are actually going to get through the Russian defense. And what else? The Middle East. We want to make sure that the genocide of the Gazans continues and that we increase the power of Israel to maintain this new land that they've taken over, which is actually bigger than Israel itself. And we've got 5 days. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We've got 5 days to get this done. That's what I woke up thinking about this morning, this scorched earth. And one of the worst examples of these devastating steps that they just made is the fact of this new round of sanctions on Russian oil companies and on the Russian oil vessels at sea and the other related entities that has immediately resulted in raising the price of oil. Who stands to gain from that? You're going to see it reflected in the local gasoline, and they're going to blame it on Trump. Your gasoline prices are going to go back up. You're expecting your gasoline prices to go down because Trump said he would do that. It probably will as soon as he opens up the Keystone and several other things. But Biden has banned offshore drilling in the last few days. And now the sanctions on Russian oil at Russian shipping vessels and all the other entities that are involved with the distribution of Russian oil, which is, as I said, it really affects India and China because I think India gets half of its oil from Russia, and I think China gets 25% of its oil from Russia. And so it's going to have a very big effect on the whole wide world economy unless it's reversed, which India and China could do if they were to immediately ignore the sanctions. And so what are the sanctions? You're going to stop buying Russian oil, or we're going to do this in your trade agreements. We're going to do this in the money agreements. And so China and India are doing so much business between them now, despite the little skirmishes that are going on in the Himalayas between China and India. They both know, as members of BRICS, founding members of BRICS, they're better off standing with Russia in the creation of this new economic dynamic than they are to bow down to the West and accept and turn off the spigots of Russian oil. That's part of the scorched earth that Biden is trying to leave, collective Biden is trying to leave behind for Trump. So the former Russian ambassador to Washington, Sergei Kislyak, expressed some, very clearly what the Russians are thinking right now as we're leading up to the inauguration. Namely that no matter who the president is, and obviously it's going to be Trump, the global interests of the United States remains the same so long as the United States continues to believe that they're the special one. Now, this is a former Russian ambassador to Washington. And to repeat myself, as long as America continues to think that they're here and the rest of the planet is here, as is depicted in the veto power of the Security Council, things like that, then as long as that continues, it doesn't matter who the president is or what Blinken has discussed many times, that he thinks the United States should lead the world and that it's the divine role of the United States to lead all the nations of this planet. As long as that continues, is Trump in a position where he can actually change that? So I've talked about Rear Admiral Thomas Buchanan last week, I think it was, who had expressed in a meeting of the CSIS policy on nuclear issues, which was essentially, without major interruption, the United States position in the post-war period, post-World War II period, is the United States willing to become just one nation among a bunch of other nations? You know, maybe having a leading role to some degree if they, shape up and go back to physical production. But, or are they going to try to maintain their hegemony with all their military bases? And it's often represented as something isolated and unique to the rest of the planet, as though there was some autonomy on the part of the United States to do these things. But when you think about it and you begin to dissect it really, what is America's role in these 800 to 900 military bases? If we have a military base in Angola, is that protecting the Americans from the Angolese? If we have a half a dozen military bases, oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Gosh, I hope it's not too late. I don't know for sure what I just shut off, but I'm trying to shut off those ads. Thank you, Beverly. I keep telling myself, Jack, for that is indeed my name, put a little checklist up there on the side of the computer. Do this, then do this, then do this. Try not to do this. Maybe by the time I do my third stream tomorrow, which will be a health show, and speaking of that, one of the reasons that I am streaming now is so I'm not limited to 3 shows a week, 2 political and 1 health. Actually, Thursday morning, I've been thinking about this. Thursday morning, I might do a 20, 25-minute stream. Friday morning, do a 20, 25-minute stream because of all the stuff that's happening that prior to getting on the stream, I would have to shut up Tuesday night and not say anything until the following Monday. I can't do that because I end up talking to my patients about all this stuff. And I end up talking to friends through texting, phone texting. What about this? What about in between patient visits? I can't do that. I have to stay focused on my patients. Speaking of that, I will divert for a moment. I saw this young lady yesterday, mid-30s, just terrible pain in her head and her neck. She couldn't, absolutely wet out of the shower. I don't think she could weigh 100 pounds. Just this tiny little fragile thing. For years, terrible pain in her neck, in her head, pressure behind her eyes. And you could see it in her face, just looking at her in her face. And she was sent in by Dan. I'll thank you, Dan. I won't mention your last name. Don't have permission to do that. And who was satisfied for our work. And so I talked to her about what our work is and what we do in stopping that and how easy it is, how you can do it painlessly. You just have to know how to do it. So I said, I don't know how to do it in your case without some film. So I took some x-rays, and it was very small, a very small misalignment. And I didn't work on her 5 or 6 minutes. And she stood up, stood taller, knew right away she was taller, walking around saying, I feel like I'm floating. Yeah, you feel like you're floating because those muscles just relaxed. So I worked on her a little bit more, then had her go rest. I always have patients rest for a few minutes in our resting room after I work on them. And then she was walking around again, and she was just going, wow, I feel like I'm floating. And I said, the whole idea of the work that we do is to loosen the muscles that are perpetually tight because of the misalignment. And the idea of life and nature is for us to go through life. The only real physical battle is the battle with gravity. Every time you stand up, every time you walk, you're moving against gravity. But when your own muscles are tight, you have to fight that tightness restriction as well as gravity. And I said, the reason you feel like you're floating is your muscles just relaxed that fast. And it's just, I wish it was that easy to solve the world's problems. Maybe it is if it's done right. But I just, as soon as I finish here, I'm going to be rushing over to the office, and there's a whole bunch of people that are scheduled. And the whole point I was trying to make here is that now with the stream, I can do shorter. The 2 hours is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, because it has to fill up that time block at K-Talk Radio. I would rather do more shorter ones, because for Pete's sake, this is going to be a 2-hour video. Who wants to watch a 2-hour video of me? Maybe me. But if they were shorter, if they were a series of shorter 20-minute ones, then I can do Thursday and Friday and Saturday, and even slip one in on Sunday, because it's so easy to sit down here now in front of the camera and pontificate as though I know something. So what do we have? About a half an hour. I really think I might do something in a much shorter version this Thursday morning. I have to record the Doug Steffen show at 7. And maybe at 6, get on for about 20 minutes. Friday, get on 7. Those of you who have subscribed, and Nick, if you're still listening, but if you're not, you'll hear this later. We have a subscription list. I see 60 people listening right now live on X. Thank you, I appreciate that. We started yesterday with 2. Now it's up to 60. This may sound a little self-promoting. Well, of course it's self-promoting. I would love to see that 1,000 by the end of the month. I'll tell you, if we can get that to 1,000, then I will make some kind of a deal with K-Talk to simulcast this through K-Talk without having to do K-Talk myself anymore, and if they want me. And so you'd still have all the rest of K-Talk programming, but all I have to worry about would be the stream. Eventually, we'll be on Facebook, but there's a lot of contractual stuff that's got to take place. I'm not so worried about Facebook as I want to promote the YouTube position and X. And if you're still listening at K-Talk, and you didn't hear what I talked about yesterday or today regarding the fact that I am now streaming, if you will go to x.com/ the @ symbol, Global Affairs UF, and get on and subscribe, you'll be notified when any live presentation is taking place. Or if you go to YouTube youtube.com/at Global Affairs Unfiltered. Then you will also like and subscribe, help me build the audience. But also, if something critical happens Wednesday night, I'm going to talk about it Thursday morning on the stream. Now, the exact times that I'm going to do this, I don't know, because we're still up in the air. But this selfless promotion is going to continue until there's an audience that things can be done with. Anyway, I was talking about the former Russian ambassador to Washington, Kislyak. I hope I'm saying that right. Kislyak, I think. And he says, what Americans are missing, the point is that America is no longer the center of the world. The economic center of the world is no longer the United States, or even less Europe. He says that it's clearly shifted to Asia. And Asia is very well conscious of that, as well as the countries of the so-called global south. And that these countries, he says, are going to have a much larger effect on world events as the United States slowly wakes up to the fact that they're no longer the economic center of the world. And that means, essentially, that the United States has to go back to the best of the traditions of what made America America. Back to the thinking and concept of Benjamin Franklin, that was reflected through Reagan to some degree with the light on the hill. The thought of the founding fathers, that this nation breaking away from colonial control wasn't designed to become another monarchy, but a nation of freedom. And John Quincy Adams, regarding his statements on foreign policy, that the United States should not go around the world looking for monsters to destroy. And the American system of Alexander Hamilton, where credit is created by the United States government at very low interest rates, 1.5%. And that money is loaned out to banks, private banking systems around the country, who cannot loan that money out higher than another 1.5%. And that money can only be loaned for businesses that are designed for the betterment of America. The infrastructure, agricultural projects, water projects, building projects, hospitals, airports, not casino playing with derivatives, but for things that would actually benefit the life of American citizens. And obviously the optimistic orientation of people like John F. Kennedy. And so basically we're in a flux leading up to the inauguration. Trump just recently criticized Biden, that without a push on having Ukraine join NATO, the war would have been avoidable. And he's blaming Biden to some degree for the Ukrainian war, not just that they've kept it going, but that they were pushing Russia into a corner and that Russia had to respond through its special military operation. But I have here in my notes a quote from Trump, where Trump says, "A big part of the problem is Russia. For many, many years, long before Putin, that you could never have NATO involved with Ukraine." And now they said that. And that's been like written in stone, and somewhere comes along the line and Biden says, no, they should be able to join NATO. And then Russia has somebody right there on their doorstep, and Trump says, I can understand their feelings about that. Look, Russia is losing a lot of young people, and so is Ukraine, and this should never, ever have started. So I don't know what Trump is going to do or can do between now and the inauguration regarding the Ukraine. But it's Russia's request that it has to be a permanent solution, not a frozen conflict. But more problematic than that is the Middle East, because of the Iran issue and the fact that there's this scuttle all across the internet right now as to where Israel is getting ready for a major attack on Iran, and they're going to go after the two nuclear facilities. And you can't take out something as complex as a nuclear facility that's 200 and 300 feet underground, or maybe further than that, I forget the numbers, without nuclear bunker busters, a nuclear-driven bunker buster. Now, if I have this right, that hasn't happened since Nagasaki, where a nuke was used in a war setting. And what is going to be the American position should Israel decide to do that? And it wouldn't just be Israel's decision. They couldn't do it without America saying, yeah, go ahead, we're behind you. And now the Houthis have driven the, I forget which aircraft carrier it is, up to the north ends of the Red Sea, which is another crazy story. But with their hypersonic missile attacks on Tel Aviv and their hypersonic missile possibility attack on an American aircraft carrier, the carrier group went all the way up to the northern end of the Red Sea, of the Red Sea, to get away from the Houthis' missile range. And so this whole idea of Iran has already launched a large-scale military exercise right now, as I speak, basically with the idea of defeating a major attack on Iran's nuclear facilities from a multitude of air threats. And this was expressed, I think, yesterday by Major General Salami, I think it is, Hossein Salami, who's the commander-in-chief of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And Iran is also deploying some of their best air defenses around their two major sites. And their best air defenses right now are identified as the Russian S-400 surface-to-air anti-missile, anti-aircraft batteries. And remember what happened? I talked about this a couple of months ago when Israel was sending a couple of F-35s up around the bottom of Iran. And I don't think they were American. I think they were Israeli. The American F-35s, but Israeli piloting, suddenly turned off their course, turned back, because their anti-missile systems were going nuts on the airplanes because the Iranians immediately targeted them. What does that mean? That means Iran has a very sophisticated air defense system right now. But at the same time, Iran is gearing up right now with major large-scale military exercises inside the nation of Iran. And at the same time, you know, the thing that separates Syria from Iran is Iraq. And Israel is getting ready for a major attack on Iran that they want to do before Trump gets in there in the 5 days that are left. That's why I called this program today the lead up to the countdown to the inauguration. And at the same time, another big fire has broken out in LA County, and the big winds start today. There's been a little bit of peace in the strength of the winds for the last little bit, but they're going to get stronger and stronger today. And so you have Iran in their defense maneuvers and exercises going on right now. Israel looking like they're getting ready to attack, and they can't without permission of President Biden. And then you have you've got am I saying this right? The Fordow nuclear site in Qom, and then the Konab nuclear complex. I don't know where that is. But Trump's Ukrainian envoy, Keith Kellogg, just yesterday or the day before, talking about this situation in Iran, saying that we have to exploit the weaknesses that we see now. Now, what does that mean? When Trump's envoy to the Ukraine is making public statements about Iran and Iran in their military defense exercises that they're doing right now, Kellogg says, well, we have to take advantage of their weaknesses this moment. It's rather complicated. But as I said earlier, 3 days from now, I think it's January 17th. When is that? Today's Tuesday. Today's the 14th, 15th, 16th. This Friday, the 17th, this Friday, is when a very major military agreement is going to be signed between Russia and in Iran, which will be stronger, as I said, I think in the first hour, than the military agreement that exists between China and Iran. So whatever happens with Iran, which does immediately affect Russia and China, and even if the current Iranian president, I don't know if I dare try to pronounce, Pezeshkian, I think, is open for relations, domestic relations with the United States, the real power is not in the president of Iran, but in the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, and the Revolutionary Guard that are in military exercises right now for not necessarily an attack on Israel, but for the defense of Iran. Does Iran have Chinese or Russian hypersonic missiles? I would be surprised if they didn't. Are those missiles right now targeted towards Haifa, Tel Aviv? Not Jerusalem. They'll leave Jerusalem alone for obvious reasons. And then there's this special envoy by Witkoff, Trump's Middle East envoy, who landed in Israel just yesterday, I think. And he said the whole time he wants to have a deal before Trump gets into the White House, a ceasefire deal with the hostages being released. And it's not clear whether that's going to go ahead or not. But I heard something on national news this morning on the TV while I was getting all this stuff set up and ready to go about the fact that they are moving closer and closer to some kind of a ceasefire. But Israel doesn't want a ceasefire, because if Israel has a ceasefire with Hamas, Hamas is just going to restock their weapons. And there were just yesterday or the day before, a lot more INF soldiers killed. There's just concern by the people fighting against genocide of the Palestinians as to what Trump's policy is going to be, because Trump has told back, I think before the election, I think Trump made the comment to Netanyahu, go ahead and finish the job, or something like that. Get the job over or finish the job or something. And obviously he was referring to Gaza. Then Trump comes out and makes that Truth Social release of Jeff Sachs' comment that Netanyahu is a dirty, low-down, belly-crawling, scum-sucking SOB. And then Trump sends that out on Truth Social. So he says one thing to Netanyahu, go ahead and finish, and over here he lets Sachs speak for him about how bad Netanyahu, to repeat myself, Netanyahu then immediately canceled his appearance at the inauguration. And so, and then what was, is it Haaretz? I can't remember. I have a quote here. Donald Trump proved his pro-Israel agenda in his first term by moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, supporting West Bank settlements, recognizing the Golan Heights as part of Israel, pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal and enacting the Abraham Accords to normalize relations between Israel and the Arab states while disregarding the plight of the Palestinians. Recently, Trump said that the U.S. should let Israel finish the job, but warned that there would be hell to pay if the hostages aren't released by the time he takes office, and threatens to blow Iran to smithereens. Whatever that means. And then if you look at the appointments, oh, this is another thing that I've talked about, the other appointments that seem to mean the most to me. Hegseth, who is a Zionist, a self-avowed Zionist. That worries me. But then the hope that I see with Gabbard and Patel and Kennedy, but then some of the others. The ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, who's an absolute religious fanatic. You know, if you've seen him on TV lately, he's promoting these little booklets for kids about who Trump is. But some of his other comments, Armageddonist comments regarding Israel. And he doesn't think that the Israeli settlements are illegal. Now remember, the West Bank isn't a part of Israel. But because nobody's standing up against them, Israel continues to move into the West Bank and continues the Gazan-type genocide against the Palestinian settlements that are in the West Bank. And so our ambassador, our coming ambassador to Israel, Huckabee, says, well, there's nothing illegal about what Israel is doing to pull the West Bank into Israel. And then there is Elise Stefanik, Trump's appointment as ambassador to the UN. She used her position in Congress to stifle this free speech on college campuses and advocates and pushing the deportation of pro-Palestinian protesters who have student visas to be able to attend the colleges that they're at, but because they don't like the Gazan genocide taking place, they get on, outside the classroom on the common grounds of the universities protesting against the genocide. And so our ambassador to the UN wants these people who are legally protesting, not the ones leading to violence, they should be, wrapped up and shipped home, but the ones who are legally protesting on tax-supported college grounds against the Palestinian genocide, she wants their visas canceled. See, that's the big Damocles sword that Schiller Institute talks about from time to time, hanging over this whole situation. And it could very well be the interpretation of what Trump said, that all hell will break loose if by the time he gets in the White House and the hostages are not released, all hell will break loose. Could that mean something else? There are ads playing right now at K-Talk. Sorry, I don't seem to have the control there that I want. It shouldn't be on. Oh, I know what happened. Thank you, Robin. Thank you for pointing that out to me. If you go to X or you go to YouTube, you don't have to listen to that. That is no longer there. You won't hear any commercials unless I, bring something in. And that's another thing that I'm excited about with the stream, because now I can bring in guests. Now I can do clips from the news, audio-visual clips right on the screen. So instead of seeing me, I can have a split screen with a guest. And there's so many guests I've wanted to bring in, but I can't at K-Talk because you have no control of the phones. And I can't bring a guest on in a somewhat semi-professional setting and having the phone ringing off the hook when I'm trying to talk to somebody. So that's why I don't have guests. But now with the stream I can. And so we're still in the gearing up stage of trying to get all these things ready for a whole new promotion of what I'm trying to get across to the public. So, and this idea of all hell breaking loose if the hostages are not released by the inauguration, is an idea and dynamic shared by an awful lot of the appointees that Trump is bringing in. So that worries me. And in the meantime, the Houthis, as I was talking about a little earlier, have launched this new attack against, it's the Truman, the USS, I knew I'd remember it, the USS Harry Truman, the aircraft carrier group in the northern Red Sea. In just the last 24 hours, claiming the attack went on for 9 hours, and they claim that it successfully forced the whole group, the flotilla, whatever you call it, to the north end of the Red Sea. And on the other side, Israel launched this joint air assault with U.S.-led naval coalition, targeting a power station and 2 ports in the Houthi-held capital of Sana'a in Yemen. So that's a very explosive situation, because what are the Houthis going to do in return now? I mean, it's all international, and because all this is affecting the whole world and the world history in the court of justice, anyway, I think the stage is being set. I wanted to talk about Slovakia and what the Prime Minister, I always called it FICO. I think it's FISO, the one who they tried to kill because he was sympathetic to Russia, is pushing for a warrant, the Poland to exercise the warrant from the International Criminal Court against Netanyahu coming into Poland, and Poland said, no, we're not going to detain him. Just get up here and let's talk. And, you know, you have Hungary with Orban, Slovakia with Fico, then Georgia now being in a pro-Russian mode, which is why the CIA was in there trying to disrupt that election. So Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, and now Croatia are having overwhelming elections of Trump-supporting individuals who are very much against the continuation of NATO's involvement in the Ukraine, all being NATO countries. And some of these recent elections as high as 75%. I think this was Milanovic in, I think it's Croatia, Milanovic in Croatia, 75% of the vote. Pro-Russia, not in the sense of being a tool or a lackey of Russia, but in the sense of what Russia wants. And Russia is not going to allow Ukraine to come into NATO. Russia is going to push to its own existential end the demilitarization of the Ukraine and the denazification of the Kyiv government. And I haven't heard this recently, but it was there a couple of years ago, an amendment to the Ukrainian constitution that will prevent them from ever becoming a member of NATO. So you've got all that stuff going on. And then there's just this incredible open dynamic that's happening in the European Union as it begins to show the signs of a coming death. NATO showing the signs of a coming death. That gives me a lot of hope, but at the same time, when the Malthusian ideas, the Hobbesian ideas of the oligarch having not needing to justify the horrible means with which it maintains hegemonic control over its population, those kinds of ideas coming in as to who, you know, what if all these things happened at once? Leading right up to the inauguration. Now, I'm not trying to, you know, I'm really not trying to spread fear and distrust or anything else, but there are signs out there that the greater dynamic of mankind, the greater concepts of the meaning of mankind, the meaning of life, may yet be able to come to the surface and bring to an end this permanent bureaucracy. And so I mentioned earlier some of the people who were behind things. Do you know who the largest landowner on the planet is? Not government-wise, individual. Who's the largest landowner who runs his own feudal empire? Not George Soros. Bill Gates owns more land in the name of a particular individual than anybody. We're talking millions of acres, millions and millions of acres owned by Bill Gates. These Bill Gates, George Soros, people who are making the news or making the policies behind the scenes. Soros is especially involved in regime change coups going on in Europe, trying to prevent Trumpism from spreading through the West. Gates has enormous positions in terms of land and wealth in Africa. These are the people who are committed to the Great Reset. This may be the number one reason they're afraid of Trump getting into office, as he might bring some serious opposition to the Great Reset that will take power away from governments. Exactly as Hobbes said. I mean, Hobbes, as I said that government should be the instruments of the aristocracy, and that's what we see today. The American government, I mean, look at was it last May when Netanyahu spoke in the combined houses in Congress? 50-some standing ovations. Some of them went on for 3 minutes. What's the role of AIPAC in control of our government? This is the kind of stuff that Hobbes talked about. Of course, he didn't know anything about AIPAC then, but he talked about this is how the aristocracy maintains control of the people. And then you got BlackRock. BlackRock is one of the companies that's handling, I think, the last numbers I saw, something like 11 trillion in wealth. And they're using it to buy up things such as farmland in the Ukraine through their special relationship with Zelensky, who isn't even the president anymore. So these are the oligarchs. These are the ones who believe in the policies of usury, speculation, and are absolutely committed to the depopulation of this planet through any means that are necessary, because they believe the earth, that the man is inherently evil and that the earth is incapable of supporting. How can that be playing? Well, K-Talk, I'm going to stop my broadcast with you and continue here with my friends on X and YouTube. You know what? I will be sending out, thank you, Samer. I will be sending out a notice, but I think I'm going to do a 20-minute segment Thursday and a 20-minute segment Friday, and maybe a 20-minute segment on YouTube and X, because, man, we are coming up to the showdown, and I can't let any of these opportunities get by me. So that's going to do it for today. I deeply appreciate your listenership, and oh, holy smoke, we got up to 80 people live. If that number can grow every day, I will keep doing this, but I'm going to cut it down to 20-minute segments, because I'll listen to somebody for 20 minutes if they got something to say, but it's hard for me to listen to somebody like myself for 2 hours. But thanks for those who were there, and there you go. The number keeps increasing. I really appreciate that. Now, if I didn't have to take off and go take care of patients, which is my number one job, I'd sit here and chat with you some more and see, I can send out a link. I can invite guests on here with me. That's coming up within a week or so. And maybe some of you should be a guest for a few minutes on this stream. I'm serious, especially people like Sammer, that I bring you on for a few minutes. What I would do is send you a link through the internet, and you would click on that link, and it will bring you on with a split screen with me, and we'll sit here and have a chat about things. Oh, that just excites me. That's what I've always wanted to do at K-Talk, but because of no editing capability at K-Talk, I could never do that. I always felt like I was just kind of treading water, keep my mouth out of the water, but now, I'll tell you, we're going to have some fun with this stream, and I don't know if my administrator, Nick, down in St. Pete, who was with me over the weekend to help me set this whole thing up, is still listening, but I can't thank you enough. I pay you enough, I think, for right now, but I can't thank you enough for making this opportunity available. So I'm going to bring this thing to an end. It will be saved and up at both YouTube and X. You just use the same things you would do to sign in to listen to the stream. If you want to refer it to people, and that's the thing I need, is to have the little like and the subscribe thing clicked, because as the number of subscriptions increase, the quicker YouTube will respond in promoting the podcast. And Nick, who studied this stuff and has worked with other people in this area, if you can show a logarithmic increase really quick, no matter if you only have a handful of people, they'll start noticing it. They have algorithms that notice these kinds of things. I said I wanted a goal of 1,000 by the end of the month, and he said there are people who've been doing this for 10 years that don't have 1,000 listeners. So hopefully I can offer the content that would make that possible. So I've got to take off and get to work. I just sincerely appreciate your friendship, your listenership, and let's make this something novel, something that I was never able to do at K-Talk. But the bottom line is to have fun. The bottom line isn't to scare people about what's coming down the pike. The bottom line is to have some fun with this. At the same time, events are discussed, the events behind the events are revealed, which is why I call this thing Global Affairs Unfiltered. So I will be back tomorrow with a health program. I'm not sure how I'm going to do this yet, but I'll be back tomorrow. But thank you for being a part of the show.